many people have died from getting the COVID jab in the United States? It's a good question. I could tell you with complete confidence that it's significantly higher than the number of people who died from SARS-CoV-2. And it may be as high as 41 times what is reported in the VAERS database. And we're going to have a deep dive with someone you're really going to enjoy, Steve Kirsch, who is the person that took not one, not two, not four, not five, not six, not seven, but 8 different processes or strategies to scientifically analyze what the underreporting is in the VAERS database. So you're going to love the deep dive we take in all the different rabbit holes and expose the underlying misinformation and the fraud that's behind these COVID jabs.
After I got vaccinated, and there was a woman who asked me, should I get vaccinated? And I'm going like, of course you should. This is the safest thing ever. This is like super safe. Nobody's died. There's no side effects. You know, you've got to get this modern technology. I'm like singing from the hymn book. And then she said something that threw me off course. Because I said, why are you asking such a stupid question? And she said, well, 3 of my relatives got the vaccine and they died within a week. And I said, no, that can't be true. You know, there's no way to think that can happen. I'm like trying to convince her that she's mistaken, right? That it must have been something else. This can't happen. This is impossible, is what I wrote her. You know, it's not, statistically, you can't have 3 people dying from the vaccine, which doesn't kill anyone. And she wrote back, yeah, but they're dead. The next incident for me was my carpet cleaner. And he came in and he showed up at the door and he's wearing a mask. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, haven't you got with the program? You know, you should all get vaccinated. Once you get vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask and all this. And he says, well, I did get vaccinated, but I had an extreme reaction. I had a heart attack 2 minutes after I got injected. And then it turned out that he described that his wife had Parkinson's-like symptoms. So she'd be like, you know, shaking uncontrollably. At that point, it was very clear to me that I wasn't being pranked. These COVID vaccines are over 800 times more deadly than the most deadly vaccine in human history. So this isn't a close call. These vaccines are the deadliest vaccines ever created by man. And they're promoted as safe and effective because people aren't hearing the other side of the story, and the CDC is expressly suppressing. It's so obvious, right? When you have the White House that has a hit list of censorship, it's very clear. And the mainstream media, like CNN, they want to give you one side of it, and they're deliberately giving you only one side of it. America, it used to be about a diversity of views, and that you'd have freedom of speech and that you'd have freedom to express your opinion. And what's happening is that freedom has been taken away. If you don't agree with the mainstream narrative, you're silenced.
Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola, helping you take control of your health and continuing to educate you in these interesting times. And actually, that's quite an understatement, but obviously due to the pandemic. And we are fortunate to interview people who really know what they're talking about and are at the leading edge of exposing the untruths. So today we're going to be dialoguing with Stephen Kirsch, who you probably heard about him. When I first saw him on the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein, I thought it was interesting. And I said, why didn't I hear of him before? But it turns out there was good reasons, because he's a newcomer to this space. And in March of this year, as late as March of this year, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but you were a strong proponent of vaccines and have been double vaxxed by you and your family.
Yeah.
But anyone who said anything different had to have their head examined. So what I admire about you is that you're a critical thinker, Even though you were propagandized, and there's good reasons for that, because it's the most effective propaganda campaign in the history of human race. You got brainwashed essentially, but you had enough critical thinking skills to think independently for yourself and come to your own conclusions. And once you did your analysis, you became a staunch converter, and you have literally sacrificed a lot personally. You've lost millions of dollars by exposing these beliefs, and because you're a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and been really successful, and you had to quit your company prematurely and lost millions in stock shares. And you just, it seems like you're doing this full time. There's no way you could put out this amount of content and not be doing this full time, because it's you're a really amazing source of information. And I really look to your analysis and what you've compiled, because of you're also not only tech entrepreneur, but you've got skills. You're an MIT grad, and I have great respect for MIT grads. So you've been able to compile analysis that really supply people like me who are I've been doing this for 25 years. Actually, our site started before Google did. So, and Google is, if you haven't recognized by now, and I'm glad to talk to you about this offline, but they're the one of the primary culprits for this whole mess, especially in spreading the propaganda. But so I've been doing it for a long time, and I've recognized that vaccines in general were not a good idea for over 30 years. I mean, it's not just the COVID nonsense. That's the most egregious example, but almost every other vaccine has glaring examples of that. And for anyone who's interested and hasn't read Dr. Suzanne Humphrey's book, The Dissolving Illusions, amazing book, because it will decimate your beliefs about smallpox and polio being the number one public health benefit of the last century. But anyway, I digress, because we're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff. And I'm just so glad to be able to dialogue with you, because I so appreciate what you've done and your absolute fervent commitment to helping people understand the truth about this important topic.
Sure. I'm happy to do it. And as you said that, I was waving the flag when if people, after I got vaccinated, and there was a woman who asked me, should I get vaccinated? And I'm going like, of course you should. This is the safest thing ever. This is like super safe. Nobody's died. There's no side effects. You got to get this, modern technology. And I'm like singing from the hymn book. And then she said something that threw me off course. Because I said, why are you asking such a stupid question? And I'm not like being polite here. I mean,
yeah.
What? And she said, well, 3 of my relatives got the vaccine and they died within a week. And I said, no, that can't be true. There's no way that can happen.
It's a coincidence.
I'm like trying to convince her that she's mistaken, right? That it must have been something else. Maybe they got hit by a truck. So I did this, and she wrote back. She said, I mean, like, this can't happen. This is impossible. Is what I wrote her. It's not, statistically, you can't have 3 people dying like from the vaccine, which doesn't kill anyone. And she wrote back and she said, yeah, but they're dead. And that was a game-changing moment for me, because I didn't think I was being
when was it? When was it? Was it March?
No, that was in early May.
Oh, May. Wow.
Yeah, this was May. I got vaccinated at the end of March. So it went a whole month before I heard this, pretty concerning story. And at first I thought I was being pranked. But they're dead. I mean, that's not like, fooled you. This is, but they're dead. And so that basically got me a little sensitized. But I was still in denial. I still thought, 1 in a million, 1 in a million. I mean, I calculated out the odds, right? If only 1 in a million people died from the vaccine, then to have 3 people that that are relatives die, it's like 1 in a trillion. Like, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I was, I did the math and I said, yeah, this is,
Well, let me stop you here because the story continues. But I'm just curious. Why do you think you were so resistant and come to reach the conclusion? Because it's just, I suspect you didn't do a deep dive and analysis and you just bought into the propaganda. But what are your reflections to suggest?
oh, what you mean as to why I,
Disbelieved her.
oh, because you were told to trust authority, right? And the FDA historically has been super conservative about approving things. And so it's based on the history of the FDA being like, if you like change like one thing in your formulation, you have to go back from square one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm operating that the FDA is still operating the same way, but they're not. And I didn't have a really good understanding of that, nor did I have an understanding that the CDC is now mission driven, and the mission is to get a needle in every arm, and that's the mission of the CDC. It's not like safety is a priority. So I didn't know that at the time. I'm still kind of operating off of these agencies are operating off the old rules, and so I have my trust in the agencies.
Okay. So then you had a close friend, I believe Tom, who had another relative of his die, and you believed him.
Well, the next incident for me was my carpet cleaner.
Oh, it was a carpet cleaner. Okay.
Yeah. And he came in, his name is Tim.
Tim. Okay.
Tim Damroth. And he came in and he showed up at the door and he's wearing a mask. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, haven't you got with the program? You should all get vaccinated. Once you get vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask and all this. And he says, well, I did get vaccinated, but I had an extreme reaction. I had a heart attack 2 minutes after I got injected. And then it turned out that he described that his wife had Parkinson's like symptoms. So she'd hold a glass of water and she'd be like, shaking uncontrollably. She couldn't hold the glass of water without spilling it. And at that point, it was very clear to me that I wasn't being pranked, that you can't have, like, there aren't very many vendors. I mean, there are like 5 vendors that come to our house during the lockdown. And this is one of them. And have one of 5 vendors have a reaction to this vaccine, and his wife have a severe reaction to the vaccine, and she didn't get better for months. That put me over the edge at that point. And then I started digging around, and I basically put my life on hold and started looking in the various database and talking to other people to understand what was going on. And every place I looked, it became very clear to me. And so on May 25th, I wrote this 250-page article, maybe the largest article for Trial Site News ever, 250 pages.
That's a book, Steve.
Yeah, it's a book. And I wrote that in less than 3 weeks.
Jeez. God, you have some incredible writing skills.
Well, as some would say, it's not disorganized and stream of consciousness, but I collected a lot of information in that time. And I came out and I said, these vaccines are dangerous. And so I wrote an article for Trial Site News saying, should you get vaccinated? ?
So how did you connect with Trial Site News?
Oh, that is a really good question. I don't know. I don't remember how we connected, but they have been absolutely fantastic, because I could never get this published anywhere else. Mm-hmm. All the mainstream media, all of the even the smaller media, would not accept anything like this. I mean, I couldn't get an op-ed in the New York Times, for example, on early treatment. They said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Come back later when early treatment is proven, and we'll run your op-ed." And my op-ed was to say, hey, we should invest in early treatment. I mean, it's a chicken and egg thing. And they wouldn't, run the op-ed. So you couldn't even do non-controversial stuff that was against the narrative of the vaccines are the only way. And nobody would accept that. And so to come out and question the vaccine, when I wrote that article, within a week, every member of my scientific advisory board quit. They said I was an evil person, that they never wanted to talk to me again in their life. And I pleaded with them. I said, look, if I've got the analysis wrong, then tell me how I got it wrong.
Okay. Now,
okay? And they wouldn't say anything. They just said, I'm an evil person, that the vaccines are safe, and that I should be ashamed of myself, and I'm causing people to die by writing the article, and I should retract it. And they never want to talk to me again in my life.
Tell our reader or viewers why you would have a scientific advisory board, because most people don't.
Well, when the pandemic first hit, I looked around for what I could do to make a difference. And I talked to a bunch of scientists, and they all said early treatment was the fastest, safest, and cheapest way to end the pandemic. And they were absolutely right. So I invested in, I recruited a scientific advisory board, and it was 14 scientists from all over the United States in different fields and different expertises. And I put in $1 million of my own money, and I raised another $5 million from other donors. And we started funding requests, grant requests from people who were doing research on early treatment. So fluvoxamine was one of the grant requests that came in. The panel evaluated, said it was good. And so we wrote them a check, and that funded the fluvoxamine trial. And then the results came out 100% successful. And then when it was published in JAMA, JAMA said, do not use this, not until it's proven. And I'm going like, what? And so a doctor that I knew had a big outbreak at Golden Gate Fields, David Seftel. And Seftel then offered fluvoxamine to the people at the racetrack. And he found that for people who got the drug, none of them were hospitalized. None of them had long haul COVID. But for people who didn't, 60% had long haul COVID, 12.5% were hospitalized, and one of them ended up dead. And so there was no doubt at that point. We had a phase 2 trial, and we had a real world example, which also showed 100% effectiveness. And the medical community said, not enough data, we'll ignore that. But they did have a key opinion leader meeting in January, and they voted 2-1 to tell physicians to recommend fluvoxamine. But the journals refused to run it.
I'm curious.
Journal, it was just a meeting notes. And 6 journals, it was submitted to 6 journals, and every single one of them declined to publish the notes to recommend fluvoxamine as a treatment for COVID, even though it was recommended by the panel 2-1. And so at this point, I knew the system was gamed. NIH did nothing after that recommendation. And this is from FDA, NIH, and CDC people that were on that key opinion leader panel. So at this point, it was very clear to me that the system is gamed, that the NIH does not want to say, they're not focused on saving lives here. Their mission is to drive this vaccine narrative and to do everything they can to make sure that the only option that you have for COVID is get the vaccine.
Yeah.
That's it.
So you were embracing a proactive strategy while you still believed in the vaccine at the time.
Oh yeah, because I said, the this early treatment is like, for number one, not everyone was vaccinated at the time, and number two, even if you get vaccinated, you can still these are non-sterilizing vaccines, so you can still get COVID. So you're going to need a treatment, and so for them to be denying this, and we applied for an EUA at the FDA, and the FDA said, well, you don't have enough evidence, we're not convinced, and also you have to come in partnered with a drug company, and we couldn't even get a drug company to partner with us on the EUA. When we offered to pay all the expenses of the drug company in getting the EUA, and none of them would would do an EUA. I think because the FDA may have scared them off.
Yeah, yeah. And for those who may not remember, EUA is an acronym for Emergency Use Authorization. So most people probably know that because of the EUA is the justification they use to introduce the vaccines. It's just a mess. So I want to kind of finish off on your bio bit, because there's so much great information to go into. So the last question I have on that is, you're a scientific advisory board on pre-treatment, early treatment. Was Peter McCullough part of that board?
Oh no! Are you? No.
He should have been. He was he was a real early advocate, as you well know. He published in late 2020 a definitive paper in one of the internal medicine journals in August, I think.
Yeah. So this group of scientists were more basic scientists, and Peter's more of a, he's a cardiologist, he's a doctor, and so sort of less on the basic science drug discovery piece of it. So. Okay. Interesting. Yes. If I had Peter on my panel, I guarantee you Peter would have not have dropped out.
All right. So
you can bank on that.
Since June, you've been cranking like crazy. I mean, even before June, you published a 250-page book in Trial Site News. So you have produced some of the most compelling information. I mean, there's so much. I mean, we're going to put a link to the PowerPoint you created, which is it was like 200 slides. Wasn't even able to finish it. I didn't think it was that long. It was like crazy good. It's like every slide is like a pearl. I'm just shocked you're able to compile all this information in one place. But anyway, you did, and we'll put a link to that. So, and it seems like you're updating it in real time. Is that something you update, or is it because it was public? Yeah, because I'm looking at this just happened 3 days ago.
Yes. Yeah.
So you'll see the current one, because obviously this interview is going to air after we have the dialogue. So
yeah. Anyway. By the way, I don't do this all myself, right? It's really hard. I have 100,000.
Oh, the secret sauce.
Yeah, the secret sauce is I have 100,000 followers on social media. Mm-hmm. And so on my main Twitter account, I've got over 60,000. On my Gab account, I've got over 30,000, and I have another account as well. But between those two accounts, I'm St. Kirsch, KIRSCH. So Stephen T. Kirsch on those platforms on both Twitter and Gab. So I like Gab because they don't censor you. Twitter, they'll slap on a label saying, "Oh, this is unsafe."
Yeah,
and,
of course.
I wish they tell me how they determine that, because I'm still clueless here. I'm not trying to spread misinformation here, but nobody tells me the correct answer. Like when I discovered that over 150,000 Americans have died from the vaccine, nobody would tell me what the right number was. They'd all say, "Well, you're wrong." Yeah, but if I'm wrong, at least tell me what was the error in the methodology or the data. Nobody will tell me that. They just telling me I'm wrong.
That is a great place to step into, because I am unaware of any more definitive analysis than the ones you have compiled. And you are conservatively saying, because that's a shocking number. I mean, you just said it and just blew past it, but the current I guess acceptance is the number of people who are documented in VAERS database, and that's just over 18,000 as we're speaking. So probably 19,000 by the time this thing gets posted. So, and you're saying 150,000, but you're saying that, and it's highly, highly conservative, because you took 7 or 8 different independent objective approaches to make this determination. And they ranged it up to 41 times what the VAERS database number was. So I think you're realistic. What your belief is, at least what I could see from your slides, is about 300,000 people in the United States have died, not worldwide, in the US.
Correct. I restricted my analysis to the United States because that's going to be the most relevant to people and something that people can get their arms around, because, if you restrict it to worldwide, people don't understand what percentage of the world, but people understand how many people in the United States and what a big number is for the US. And so I looked at 8 different ways, and VAERS is just one of the ways. And so when people say, well, you can't use VAERS for this, you can't do causality, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, I'm saying, fine, here's 7 other ways. Mm-hmm. We got the same answer. In fact, the VAERS analysis, we determined that VAERS was underreported by a factor of 41, which is quite reasonable, because there was an analysis done. It was done with there's a system called ESP VAERS that was done 10 years ago, and it's in Bobby Kennedy's book. I don't know if you got the pre-release on the book.
I did. I read it, the whole thing, and I actually interviewed him last week, and it will be his interview will appear the week before.
Okay, so the chapter on ESP VAERS is that 10 years ago we had a system where we could actually discover all the unreported things in VAERS. And what they discovered is, oh no, this shows that VAERS was severely underreported. And these vaccines that we thought were safe, they're not safe at all. So what did they do? They killed the project. Mm-hmm. So the reason that we have such a bad system today is by design. Mm-hmm. If we had a good system, it would show all the flaws for all of these vaccines that we've been giving people, and we would show that, oh shit, we goofed, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to show that, so they shit canned the system, and this is why there is. Why don't you expand
that? I totally agree with you, but there's some real common challenges to implementing the data that contribute to that. So you want to expand on that? Because I think it's really important for people to understand why it's almost impossible to have a good system. It's as you said, by design. It is implementing that data from clinicians is beyond challenging for most.
Yeah, because we have a system which is set up to protect privacy. It's not to do healthcare. Protecting people's privacy is more important than discovering adverse events and actually
saving people's lives.
Saving people's lives. That's right. That takes a back seat to privacy. Privacy is way more important. So all these records are private. So the only time you get these entries into the VAERS system is when a physician voluntarily agrees to spend 30 minutes of his time to make a VAERS report. And what happens invariably is they make the report, they're like 90% of the way done, and then the system crashes on them and they have to start over.
Yeah. And nothing's saved. Nothing saved.
Nothing is saved.
They have to start from the very beginning.
Right. So physicians, once they learn this, they change their mind. So this one neurologist I know in California had 2,000 VAERS reports that she needed to file. She's a neurologist. And she only reported 2 because after 2, she said, look, there is no way, I don't have the time for this. This is so frustrating. So she's underreported by a factor of 1,000.
Yeah. And they're required by law to report it, but no one compensates them. 2,000 would be 1,000 of her hours. And I don't know what the neurosurgeon's rate is, but it's probably a lot. So that would, they're asking her to donate that time.
Correct. There's no compensation for those reports, which is a shame because they should be compensated so they can hire somebody to put in those reports so they get the data. But again, they don't want to get the data. They only want to get a fraction of it. And then what happens is Dr. John Su at the CDC is responsible for the VAERS analysis. And when he presents this myocarditis cases, he says, well, we only got 100 reports or, 75 reports per million if you're age 16 on myocarditis. See, that's a low number. But he never talks about the underreporting factor. So if you actually calculate this underreporting factor using John Su's own method, which he doesn't use, and he refuses to use it, and he refuses to even answer any questions about it. Like, I got a reporter that's asking the FDA, hey, what's the underreporting factor this year? They will not answer that question. It's just a number. Anyone can calculate it. Aaron Siri calculated it. Jessica Rose calculated it. I calculated it. It took me maybe a couple of hours to do it because I wanted to do it right. I did it really, really carefully. And nobody, like one person said, oh, you actually did it wrong because you used the wrong time frame. And I said, oh, you're right. Nobody ever pointed that out. And so I did it with the right time frame. And then since then, nobody's been able to criticize my my calculation. So I calculated 41, which means you see, so on the VAERS, you have to be careful. A lot of people look at open VAERS, and they look at the red box summaries and they see, 16,000
Do you like Open VAERS? It's an alternative.
Oh yeah, no, I love Open VAERS. Liz, who runs it, she's made some changes at my request. One of the changes that she made was to have a little switch on that red box summary. So there's now a little slider at the top, and make sure if you're looking for the US data, you slide that little slider at the top of openvaers.com and you slide it to the right. That shows you the US only data. So there are 8,000 deaths in the US data. You multiply that by 41, you get 300,000. You take off 2% because 2% is background events. And then you're looking at excess deaths caused by the vaccine.
I thought it was 18,000 in the US.
No. That's the foreign. That's
a foreign too. Oh, I didn't realize this. Yeah. So what's reported in VAERS is foreign and US.
Correct.
Oh.
Yes. So you always have to flip that slider, and then you get to 8,000, and then you take 8,000 times 41.
Okay.
And you get a big number. Now we actually calculated, we had other ways to calculate the excess deaths. And, some of these ways would calculate excess deaths of only 150,000 and not the 300,000 that you get in VAERS. And so when I talk about excess deaths, I'm always using the conservative number because I've got 8 different ways to get to that number. And only one of them used the VAERS database. So when I talk about 150,000, I'm like, I'm on really solid ground on that one. And nobody in the world has said, oh, Steve, let me tell you, here's how your 8 ways are wrong, right?
Yeah.
And nobody comes up with, Steve, let me show you the proper analysis. And I did it 8 different ways, and it came out to a different number.
Yeah.
Nobody has done that. Now, there's a reason for that, of course, that there's no way to dispute that 150,000.
And it's even worse because you put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I offered $1 million to anybody.
To challenge this, and you would give them $1 million if they could disprove you, and no one has taken
correct. Free $1 million research grant to any academic who can publish a paper. So it's not. I'm not making the call. All I have to do is publish in a top tier, and then there's a minimum impact factor for the journal. Mm-hmm. You publish it in the journal, and it doesn't get retracted. And you publish a number that is a factor of 3 less than our number, or a factor of 3 more than our number, right? Because you can, if you can show that it's greater, I'm fine with that. You show it's less, and you get it published in a peer-reviewed journal. I'm fine with that too. Nobody's been able to do that.
Yeah, that's
free $1 million. No upfront cash required. But they won't. That nobody has even attempted to do that because they know. This statistical analysis that I offered the $1 million on. This is done by Matthew Crawford. Matthew Crawford is a brilliant statistician. I mean, this is one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and he talks to people like Jeffrey Morris, who's a professor of biostats at University of Pennsylvania, and he makes Jeffrey Morris look like he doesn't know what he's doing.
Wow. So these 7 other methods used to make this calculation, was this also done by him?
No, they were done by independent people. So I gathered like Mark Girardeau did one of the analysis, and we had so Matthew, another analysis we did was based on polling data. So we would poll people, and at first I polled my Twitter followers, and then Matthew said, "No, that's not good. Your Twitter followers are biased."
Yes, 100%.
Well, but really, this is they're people too, and they're not going to lie.
So you polled them about people that they knew that had passed away?
Yeah. I basically said, how many people do you know have died from COVID? How many people do you know who died from the vaccine?
Yeah.
And whenever I do that, they're pretty similar numbers. And the stats actually don't change over time. So, in 30 seconds, not 30 seconds, maybe in 30 minutes, you get the numbers in from your poll, and they're pretty accurate. And it turns out that they were not far off what you do if you poll people who are, not your followers. So when I did the Twitter poll to see what would happen, and I was shocked because the numbers came in the same. The people knew as many people, I said, how many people know one person who died, two people died, three people died. And on both sides, the numbers were coming in very similar. People knew as many people who died from COVID as had died from the vaccine. Now, and a lot of people knew, like there were some people who said, I know 20 people who died from COVID and nobody from the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other people on the other side who said, geez, I know a lot of people who died from the vaccine, but nobody who's died from COVID. Mm-hmm. And so everybody has their own sort of reality filter on this. And the problem with the vaccine thing is you have to be aware that the vaccine actually kills people, because a lot of people are in denial, right? They get a heart attack 2 weeks after they get the vaccine. They say, oh, just a coincidence. He didn't die from the vaccine. He died from a heart attack, right? So the vaccine stuff is really, really hard for people to make a causal inference when I do the poll. So the vaccine side is actually going to be an underestimate, because people are only going to vote if they only, they cognitively realize that people have died from the vaccine. So we had a professional polling organization do this. And by the way, a lot of pollsters turned us down. They said, oh, well, you won't get meaningful results from this, so we don't want to waste your money. No. They turned us down after we, because they didn't like the question that they were being asked. They didn't want their name associated with a poll that would show that the vaccines were unsafe. But we found a polling agency that would do it. We did the poll. Matthew analyzed the number, and we actually did two polls. One was a smaller number of people, and the other one was a larger number of people. And they both came in at about 170,000 people from the polling. So that was one of the lower bound estimates that we used to say, hey, we've got all 8. The ones at the bottom were kind of sketchy, right? Because it's based on people's perception and
it wasn't as objective data.
Versus government data and so forth. So Matthew's analysis came at, on an average, we kill 411 people per million, and per million doses, not per million vaccinated, per million doses. And so, that comes in somewhere around 150,000 as well. And that's a worldwide analysis, 35% of the total world's population on that one. So, and that's the one that nobody can figure out how to dispute that one. And Matthew spent a long time on that analysis. Now, by the way, I've had this cough ever since I've been vaccinated. I still can't seem to get rid of it.
Well, I don't mean to be laughing, but it's just shocking because you're exposing the tip of the spear. We've only been into this for 10 months. 10 months, I would say, fully, at least at a significant level. And, there obviously people die acutely, but there's long-term side effects from this, and there's long haul syndrome. And, so it's just, we have no idea of the magnitude of the exact magnitude of what's going to actually happen. So I'm curious, you say 150,000 deaths on the low end. I'm wondering, you've done that brilliant analysis with those 8 different methods of assessing what the number should be. But I'm wondering if you've done a similar analysis on how many people really died from COVID-19, because it's non-disputable. I mean, we have got multiple government videos showing that the definition of a COVID-19 death is anyone that dies, no matter what the cause, motorcycle accident, terminal cancer.
If you die within 28 days of a COVID diagnosis, you're considered a COVID death.
Legally classified as COVID death. So it's not a manipulation. They changed the definition. So I'm wondering if you've analyzed that type of definition change as to what the true numbers might have been.
Yeah. So the answer is that Italy, there was an editorial done in Italy on the Italy numbers, because they changed the definition to say, hey, instead of dying with COVID, how about from COVID? And they discovered that if they looked at patients that didn't have a comorbidity and that died from COVID, in other words, they're not likely to die from another cause, they found it was only like 2%. And so
Well, the
So I was-
CDC's data was like 4% or 6. It was
yeah. Well, so these are the pure numbers of people who said, just no comorbidities, whatever. I mean, CDC has their numbers, but
yeah.
the Italian said this. And that doesn't mean that the other people didn't die from COVID. It just sets kind of a lower bound that these people for sure died from COVID.
Mhm.
And so I was actually talking to Matthew last night about that. And I said, so what's your take on this? Like, is it, we're looking like close to 2% of the number, or, whatever. And I said, I think it's it's got to be somewhere in between. And he said, yeah, it's somewhere in between those two extremes. We don't know where it is in between those two extremes, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's like 10%, if the true death count from COVID is like 10% of what they tell you, in which case we did all of this for something that kills as many people annually as influenza does.
Yeah.
And influenza was a non-event.
And we're just comparing to the treatment, because if it's 10%, and I think 750,000, 800,000 people have passed from COVID in the US. So that's 75,000. Your conservative estimates of deaths in the United States is 150,000, twice that.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, the deaths from the jab, which is, of course, a much more appropriate term to call it, far exceeds the people who've died from the disease.
Yes, but it's worse than that.
Okay, why is it worse than that?
Because all the scientists I talk to always trust these phase 3 trials, even when they're gamed and even when there's fraud, like Maddie DeGarry. She was paralyzed. She was in the kid trial, 1,000 kids. She's paralyzed, 1 of 1,000 kids. Like, who wants to have a 1 in 1,000 chance of paralyzing your kid? Well, they misreported it. They reported it as abdominal pain. Janet Woodcock promised to investigate. The CDC and the FDA never called Maddie. It has never been investigated. Nobody, the CNN, mainstream media, New York Times, they don't give a hoot about the proven fraud.
Permanently disabled. This woman is permanently disabled the rest of her life.
Permanently disabled. Yeah. So the point is that fast forward, 6-month Pfizer study comes out, and it shows that we saved 1 life from COVID in 22,000 people. 1 in 22,000, they can show in their clinical trial proven that they saved 1 life at 22,000, because there were 2 COVID deaths in the placebo group, 1 COVID death in the treatment group. That's a net savings of 1 life, and they had to inoculate 22,000 people to do that. That means when you inoculate 220 million people, you're going to save 10,000 lives. Okay, so the vaccine will save 10,000 lives, but it will kill 150,000, which means we're killing 15 people to save 1. And for kids, it's even worse.
Yeah, so I was going to say that is actually a good number compared to the kids.
Yeah, the kids is 117 kids to save 1. So by vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, we're going to kill 117 kids from all-cause mortality, which means cardiac arrest, intracranial hemorrhage, pulmonary embolism, you name it. There's all-cause mortality caused by the vaccine. And we're going to save 1 kid.
Yeah.
And, the number of kids, you inject 28 million kids. It's estimated that probably 50% of those kids have already been exposed to the virus, and basically nothing happens to them. So, and it's 1 in a million before that. So we're maybe saving 14 kids.
But I think it's even worse, because when I interviewed Bobby Kennedy, and I'm not sure where he got the stats, but he was telling me that there is no recorded case of any child in that age group in the entire world dying from COVID that didn't have an existing comorbidity.
Correct. Yeah.
Zero.
Right.
So if the denominator is 0, and you're trying to figure this thing out, is basically infinite. It's 100%.
Correct.
Every single vaccine you get. So it's like 28 million to 0 to 1. Or
Yes,
it would have been
to 0.
Millions. It's millions.
To 0. The number needed to vaccinate, the NNTV,
yes,
for these vaccines is infinity. infinity.
Yes.
We have to.
Doesn't compute.
Yeah, it's infinity, as in infinity, the bad way. Dr. Toby Rogers, and you can look up his Substack.
Yeah, that was a brilliant article. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, he spends his life doing risk-benefit analysis. He says, look, the NNTV is like infinite, but I'll try to compute it, rationally. Came up with the NNTV is 1.6 million, and assuming that everything worked, that these guys are telling the truth, right? So he had to basically use the assumption that the drug companies were telling the truth. And so he computed 1.6 million. He says that's the highest NNTV in the history of vaccination. and then he computed that he basically said, look, we're going to kill 117 kids to save one. This makes no sense. And when you look at it, the other way to think about this vaccine is that one of the guys on the committee was interviewed by 60 on the FDA committee. It was Paul Offit. Dr. Paul Offit was interviewed 20 years ago on CBS 60 Minutes. Mm-hmm. And he said the smallpox vaccine is so dangerous that we would never consider doing that in modern times because it's way more dangerous than vaccine. It's the most dangerous vaccine ever invented. And we would not give it. We would not give the smallpox vaccine today if it was invented today. And the smallpox vaccine only kills one person per every million people vaccinated, which is a lot. You mm-hmm. vaccinate 300 million people, you're going to kill 300 people. That is unacceptable, according to Paul. But he just voted for a vaccine which kills 800 people per million that fully vaccinated. Right, it's 400 million per dose. It's 411 million per dose. It's 800 million. It's over 800. 822 million, 822 people per million doses. Per million. 822 per million vaccinated. 411 dead per million doses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means that these vaccines, these COVID vaccines, are over 800 times more deadly than the most deadly vaccine in human history. So this isn't a close call. These vaccines are the deadliest vaccines ever created by man. And they're promoted as safe and effective.
Well, that's partially because they're not vaccines. They're messenger RNA instructions.
No, they changed the definition.
No, I know, but the reality is you can change a definition. It doesn't change reality. Just because you change the definition.
No, I know, but they're good at changing definitions. They've done that before on these side effects. They've changed the definition so that the mRNA vaccines wouldn't have a specific side effect because they changed the definition of what's required to have that particular adverse event.
They actually changed the definition also of someone who's vaccinated, so that if you die, like if your friend
within
Tim,
2 weeks,
within 2 weeks of being fully vaccinated, so it has to be after the second dose. So you could die within the day after the first dose, and that is not a death from the.
That's not a vaccine death, my friend.
No, it's not. It doesn't qualify because we make the definition.
Look, these guys are really smart. I got to hand it to them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm usually really good at poking holes and figuring out, here's how we do this. And it's been, they've got all, it's like they got all the crack, they got all the nooks and crannies, they got them sealed. And I talked to a friend who knows someone on the committee. And he said, this guy who's on the committee, and I won't mention his name, but he said he's an upstanding guy.
Which committee? The VRBPAC committee?
I don't want to compromise. He's on VRBPAC, or he's on the ACIP committee. I'm not gonna nail it for you. So VRBPAC is the FDA committee, and ACIP is the CDC's committee, and he's on one of those two committees. And so my friend talks to him, and he says, "Hey, why'd you vote for that?" And he says, "Well, I didn't want to end up like Martin Kulldorff, because if you basically raise your voice and say there's something wrong, you get kicked off the committee. And this is what happened to Martin Kulldorff. He had been on these committees for like forever. Top statistician. He's got impeccable credentials. He starts to say, hey, this is wrong. So what happens? He gets kicked off he gets kicked off a CDC committee, and Rochelle Walensky, signs off on kicking him off the committee, not because he's wrong on the science. It's because he doesn't agree with the narrative. And so this is what happens. If you are on the committee, the only way you get to stay on the committee is that you vote the way they want you to vote. And if you vote the other way, you find yourself off the committee. So if you want to have an impact, you need to vote the way they want you to vote and to state your objections in such a way that you can maybe, move things in the right direction. But this guy also said that, well, he didn't think that we should give it, and he voted for the 5 to 11. Mm-hmm. And he said that he thought it should not be given to every 5 to 11-year-olds. It should only be given to those with excessive risk factors for COVID.
Those with comorbidities.
Right. And of course, there is no analysis. These guys have zero analyses to back that up. Right. There's no justification for that. There's no, he can't justify that on paper. It's just a seat of the pants argument. And so he said, yeah, I voted for it so that there would be a 1/3 dose version of the vaccine on the market. So if we approve this, then they can create this 1/3 dose vaccine. And I'm going like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because any doctor can do an off-label and write an order to vaccinate with 1/3 the dose.
Yeah.
So he's just trying to justify. Yeah. He's just trying to justify his vote.
Because most of those people, as I understand it, they had conflict of interest. They were either direct employees of pharma or.
Yep.
So it was I think the primary conflict, but it's a staff committee. It's just there to rubber stamp what they want.
Rubber stamp. And I have been emailing these people incessantly. I'm saying, guys, you need to look at the VAERS data. Can we have a discussion? The VAERS data shows that this is this is killing lots of people. And more importantly, I did Peter McCullough asked me, hey, could you do this analysis by age? Let's see what it is, for 80-year-olds, So I did that. For 80-year-olds, we kill 2 80-year-olds to save one. And when you're a 20-year-old, we kill 6 to save one. And so the vaccines don't make sense for any age group. And if you have extra comorbidities and so forth, there is no justification still for taking these vaccines. Like, nobody should get these vaccines, and there is no cost-benefit analysis that I have seen that shows that it is beneficial. Because even if your comorbidity caused you to be twice as susceptible of dying from the vaccine, and you can say, oh, well, that will neutralize it. Well, it's 1 for 1. I mean, you're not going to take an intervention which is just as likely to kill you as to save you. You want to take an intervention which is, at least 10 times more likely to save you than to kill you, because it's an optional intervention. Like, what kind of business do you have taking an intervention which is 50-50, and the other thing I want to say is that the societal benefit argument, like, people are saying, well, you're selfish because you didn't get vaccinated. Well, that's
irrational.
That's irrational. Yes, I was going to say a different word. You caught me on that. But yeah, there is no. You ever seen a CDC analysis showing you the societal benefit of being vaccinated? Doesn't exist.
No.
And there's a reason it doesn't exist, because it is so tiny that it's ludicrous. And if it's non-zero, even if we grant that it's non-zero, it is so tiny as to be minuscule. And I went on to Clubhouse and I said, okay, look, these vaccines are dangerous, right? This is the reason you don't get vaccinated, like if there's a pure societal benefit and there's zero risk to me, there's no risk for disability, there's no risk for long-term effects, there's no risk for short-term effects, there's no risk I'm going to have Bell's palsy. So anyway, if there are no downsides of this, then people would say, sure, I don't mind, societal benefit, maybe there's some societal benefit, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But, when your life is at stake here and there's a 0.1% on average, right? It's 1 out of 1,000 people will get killed from these vaccines, 1 out of 1,000. So if I say, hey, your life, suppose I say that your life could save 100 person years, right? So in other words, 1 person for 100 years, 10 people for 10 years. Nobody wanted to raise their hand to volunteer to do that, to sacrifice their life to save 100 person years. Mm-hmm. Then I said, okay, what about 1,000 person years? I did this on a Clubhouse room, and asked for a show of hands. It was live. What about 1,000 person years? If you could sacrifice your life to save people you don't know, 1,000 person years, nobody would do that. It's nonsensical.
Probably wouldn't do it a million. They probably wouldn't do it.
Right, because it's nonsensical. We have a constitutional right to life. Mm-hmm. And look, if somebody wants to volunteer their life, like suppose, Joe, I said, Joe, let me shoot you. And if I shoot you, I will save 1,000 people. Would you do that? I don't think you would. And I don't think you're being selfish about it. I think you have a family, you have friends, you have loved ones, you have people you interact with. And for you, you're special because you create content that impacts the lives of millions of people in a really positive way. So why would I ask you to sacrifice your life? And everybody has their own special way that they contribute to society. And why would we ever ask somebody, like maybe we should ask Joe Biden, Joe, if you give up your life to save, 1,000 people, would you do that? Now it'd be interesting to see what he says.
Well, he supposedly got the jab, but a lot of people speculate that it was just a saline placebo.
Yeah, could very well be. He might have gotten some really good advice on that.
So I was impressed that you were able to testify before one of these committees we mentioned, the VRBAC and the ACEP, or was it both? Did you testify?
Both.
Okay. So this is amazing because I believe that they were on the East Coast. So you traveled all the way across the country to testify at these committee meetings.
No, virtual.
Oh, was it virtual? Oh, okay. I thought darn, I didn't realize it was virtual. Okay. So that helps because
that's
easier. Like taking 2 days out of your life to go to this place and testify. Right. So
and they don't listen to you either,
I know, but why would you even donate the time? Because what the end result is. They voted unanimously against what you were telling them. No one listened to what you said.
Yes.
They heard it and just discounted it.
I don't feel so bad because they don't listen to anybody else who testifies either. Yeah. So I don't take it personal. It's a
sham process. It's an absolute sham.
Yeah. Well, but you see, they're not required to listen to anything that you say. So when you have the public session, that's their cue. Get lunch, go to the bathroom, have a drink, whatever. And then they come back later. And then this is why they never refer to anything that is said. Like you will never see anything from any of the speakers. Nothing gets repeated by any of the committee members. It's as if we don't exist. It's there because they're required to have that. Mm-hmm. They're going through the motions, but they're not listening to anything that's said. And I said at the last ACEP meeting, I said, look, underreporting factor, you cannot do a risk-benefit analysis if you don't have the underreporting factor. You have to ask for that. Mm-hmm. Okay, because I wanted to make it public that I made these people aware of it. And no, it made no impact on them. And this is something that's completely obvious. When Dr. Toby Rogers did his risk-benefit analysis, he had to use the underreporting factor in VAERS because VAERS is the, has the death rates. And you can't do a risk benefit if you can't quantify the risk. You have to be able to quantify the risk. To quantify the risk, you have to know the underreporting factor. Otherwise, your risk assessment is useless. It's junk.
Mm-hmm.
Will they do that? No, they didn't do it at all. They paid no attention. And my point of appearing in the committee is to prove that I brought it to their attention. So they can't say, well, gosh, we
didn't know.
We didn't know.
Realize it. If only we would have known.
If only we would have known. Yeah, if only we would have known. Yeah. And I made it really clear to John Suh, right? Because John is the person who's responsible for calculating the underreporting factor using his own methodology. Mm-hmm. And I said, John, I used your methodology. John Suh is the VAERS expert at CDC. And I eviscerated him on my Substack, stevekirsch.substack.com. I mean, he is eviscerated. And I then, and before I published, I said, John, this is what I'm going to write about you. If I'm wrong, correct me. Here's my personal cell phone number. Call me anytime.
Wow.
Never calls.
Yeah.
And I do this multiple times. And I leave voice messages for him, and I send him emails, and I CC Tom Shimbakoru or whatever and I'm sure I pronounced his last name right. And also the CDC safety committee on the autoresponder. It's not an autoresponder. They're actually people that monitor that. So I'm making it real clear that, hey, I don't want to spread any misinformation, John. Mm-hmm. And I also don't want to get sued for defamation. Sure. And so they can't sue me. So Sue can't sue. It's kind of,
yeah, you can sue anyone, but
right. But there's no to get defamation. He's a public figure. To get defamation, he has to show malice. Right. And if I'm reaching out to him to say, "Hey, John, I just want to do the truth," and he doesn't respond, he can't claim it was malicious because I offered him an opportunity to correct it. But I mean, he gets eviscerated in this email, and he does not respond. And the fact that he's not responding tells me this guy knows exactly what he's doing, and he's literally killing hundreds of thousands of people by not going public with this. Because you could label it incompetence, but mm-hmm. once you called him on this with clear evidence and with 3 other people, right? It's me, Jessica Rose, and Aaron Siri, and we all calculated the underreporting factor, and we all got within like 20% of each other. So it's not a hard calculation to do. John Suh has never done that calculation. And once he does that calculation, then he's going to have to admit that he was wrong about myocarditis, that it is much more prevalent than he says. And I think it's like, 1 in 380. It's like 300. It's like 1 in 325 boys age 16 will get myocarditis.
Yeah, and that's a tragedy.
That's a real tragedy.
But it literally pales in comparison to what they just did last week. Passing this jab to the 5 and 11-year-olds, completely helpless, defenseless, innocent children. So
yeah, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. If you on my Substack, I have a letter from Gert Vanden Bosch, and he calls this a real tragedy because we're compromising the immune systems of our kids for life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just shocking. So I'm wondering, in light of this, if you've done an analysis on the projection of the number of kids that will likely die from this. Now, I'm convinced that there's at least, my guess, and probably more, a half of the parents, hopefully 2/3, who will absolutely refuse to have their children vaxxed. Hopefully, I mean, that is the message we've got to get out there. You cannot allow your child to get anywhere near this vaccine.
Absolutely. There's no question. This isn't even a close call, and nobody will debate us on this. Look, I've got a team of 25 experts, and they're all experts in all different phases, right? Because nobody's like the expert on everything. So I've got a team of 25 people that I call on that, you know, if we can do a debate, and nobody wants to debate us. No, nobody. They all refuse. I mean, I offered people on the committee, I said, name your price. I will make a donation to your research project at your university. Name your price. You know what I got? I got back crickets. They won't do it for any amount of money. You know, not all the, I give them all the tea in China, and they will not do it. Nobody at the CDC, you know, you have the Surgeon General saying misinformation is a big problem in America. And great. If you want to stop the misinformation, all they have to do is one thing. It's real easy. Stop talking.
Yeah, he and the president and others have called me out as being the primary source of the misinformation.
Yes, aren't you like number one?
I'm number one, you know, according to their stats, you know, through social media. So
yeah, and that's
which is a lie, because Facebook did their analysis, and they, instead of having 2/3 of the 12 of us collectively supposedly produced 2/3 of the misinformation, but Facebook said their analysis shows it's less than half of 1%. Because they hired they trusted a front group that was funded by dark money.
What, that you're only doing 1/2 of 1%?
Collectively, the 12. That's what, you know, they claimed it was 2/3. 2/3. So the actual number, it was, I don't know the numbers of that, 1/2 of 1%. It's hundreds, 100.
Right. Well, I tried to contact the people who made that list. So this is the Misinformation Dozen.
Yeah, it's the CCDH, Center for Countering Digital Hate.
Yeah. So first of all, they can't count.
Yeah.
Because there are 13 people on the list. And they call it the Misinformation Dozen.
Yeah.
Okay. So other than they can't count, I asked them, I said, so, hey, look, the easiest way to stop these guys is just to debate them.
Yeah.
And he blocked me.
No surprise.
Yeah, this is what happens to all the people that, you know, anybody who says, oh, I'm spreading misinformation. I said, great, you'd like to have a debate? Let's, you know, you can expose me. You know, please expose me. It's a public interest. You need to expose these misinformation providers. That is the best way to stop them, is just to show that they have no, you know, there's nothing behind their claims. Just debate them. That's the fastest way to stop the misinformation.
Yeah, but they'll refuse
old-fashioned scientific debate.
You won't get them to engage in a conversation.
Oh, no, you won't, because they know they'll lose.
Yeah.
And so that's why they have to do censorship, because when you don't have the facts and evidence on your side, the only thing you have, the only way you win is through censorship and through making sure that you get the platform. And
well, and it's in continuing to repeat all the true misinformation through the media and all the public health officials. But we got on a tangent. It was an important tangent, but I want to get back to the question I posed to you with respect to how many kids do you think will die if it's fully implemented, assuming it may be only 1/3 to half of the kids that ultimately get the jab.
So you ask how many kids will die?
Yeah, from the jab. Yeah.
It's going to be
the same. Do you think it'll be same or more than?
Yeah.
You can make an argument it's going to be higher.
Well, the kids die at a lower rate. So we think that the rate that kids die, if we don't know the answer, right?
We have data from
the answer. That's the problem.
12 to 16-year-olds or 17.
Yeah. So we extrapolate out the numbers, you know, so we say, oh, you know, it's declining, you know, the earlier age groups get, you know, fewer deaths per million. So we're probably looking at between maybe 10 and 20 deaths per million doses.
Okay, 10 or 20. So
not per million doses. So double that if you look at per fully vaccinated.
So a couple hundred. You don't think it'll be thousands or even tens of thousands. It'll be hundreds.
Well, you're going to take 18 million. So we'll call it 20 million. And you multiply that by So it's like, yeah, it's going to be in the hundreds. It's maybe 300 kids will die. But it could be more than that, right? It could
Yeah.
be.
The myocarditis levels should go up.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have 400. We could easily kill more kids in that age range than have been killed. Well, we'll kill more kids in that age range than been killed by COVID.
Oh, for sure. There's no healthy kids have ever died of COVID. That's
right.
the thing.
That's the thing. I mean, we're just going to kill kids.
All you have to do is one.
Yeah. No. There's no question that, Ron Kostoff published a paper. It's a peer-reviewed journal. It's never been retracted. And it actually came out before my FDA testimony. I didn't even realize it. And it showed that in his analysis, it showed that we will kill, it was like 5 old people die for every old person who's saved. And and he said, then it gets worse if you're younger.
Yeah. So I'm very impressed with your commitment and your dedication to making a dent in this travesty that we're all exposed to. So I'm wondering, you've probably given some serious thoughts as to what might be the most expeditious solution to circumventing some of the inevitabilities that are happening and convincing people. Yeah. So I'm wondering what your strategies because I was actually, sometimes I get downloads, and I got a download. I was thinking that it's so, you hear these numbers and you have 150,000, 300,000 people dead in the United States from the jab. That's a lot of people, but it's still in your head. It's a number. It's not in your limbic emotional part of your brain. So it seems to me to actually making these deaths real and just bombarding people with all the realities and the survivors telling people exactly what happened and how decimated they are and sharing the specific details, making it real for each, as many as you can. To me, this seems a powerful way to convince people.
Correct. Yeah. So each of us has kind of our own thinking about, how do you break this, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get through the cognitive dissonance? Right. Because we've lost a lot of friends. I'd say, it's almost like 99 out of 100 friends. People do not talk to us anymore. And what's interesting is that people on my side of the fence are perfectly happy to engage with people on the other side and say, hey, I'll say, hey, let's talk about it. If you disagree with me, let's talk about it. People on the other side say, don't want to talk about it. Right. And so it's interesting that the people who realize this are the people who are much more likely to want to get into a discussion on it. And the people on the other side who feel that the vaccines are safe, they don't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's also into cognitive dissonance is really strong. Like there's this one guy I know, and he said, Steve, you're wrong. Look at the deaths. They've gone down, from the vaccine. And I said, yeah. But look at the all-cause mortality. It's gone really way up due to the vaccine. And he says, no, you have to look at the lives saved over here. And it's like the magician, right? The magician is always trying to distract you, saying, hey, look, 90% relative risk reduction. Let's not talk about the absolute risk reduction. Come on, looky here. Look, 90% relative risk reduction. And it's like, and don't take a look at all these other people who died because of the vaccine. Those things are not important. Look here, it's the magician, it's distraction.
Well, and part of it too is that, that's a great example because you have access to the truth. The CDC, I think just last week published data that's saying, no, people who get the jab actually have a lower all-cause mortality. Yeah, totally conflicting what all the other data show.
Right. And Janet Woodcock, I sent Janet Woodcock my deck of 180 questions. I said, Janet, I'll bet you can't answer any of these 180 questions. Doesn't this concern you? And then she sends me back an email saying, yeah, but look at the CDC analysis showing that after you get the jab, there's this 2/3 drop in mortality. And look, my friends and I, when we saw that paper, we're like laughing our heads off. Here's the stats on like 18 to 44-year-olds. That it's like 35% die from accidents. Okay. So, and then the rest die from disease.
Mhm.
Okay. Heart, cancer, heart disease, whatever. And so if you get a 2/3 reduction, you now have to cut into the number of accidents that people are getting. It means that they can't die from any disease anymore.
Yeah.
And they're also less likely to have accidents, right? Because you don't expect that if you get a vaccination, your chance of getting an accident is going to be less.
Well, they do. Obviously.
Well,
They would have you believe
so the point
that.
is that you have to say, okay, fine. The only way to get a 2/3 reduction is like nobody dies from anything anymore, any disease. And we also reduce the number of accidents that they have. Like, this is like, they should,
Magic.
people should be beating down the doors because this is the mortality. This is the immortality drug. And, but so here's the reality of this, all kidding aside, there's no mechanism of action that could possibly justify that people are going to be better off after getting these vaccinations. Nothing is improved. You are not immortal. You are just the opposite. Your immune system is compromised. You're can be more likely to get COVID. In the UK, they showed that 40-year-olds, after the honeymoon period goes, 40-year-olds were twice as likely to get infected if they were vaccinated. You have, in the US, you have hospitals where you have a 50% vaccination, community vaccination rate, and the hospital admissions are 80% vaccinated people. Okay, you can't make these statistics up. And in fact, the CDC was confronted by these statistics and they just ignored them.
Well, that's why they create their own. That's why they
make up
they
stuff.
Published that paper that was absolute ridiculous nonsense, yet it was accepted by almost everyone who believes the narrative. And
yes, and nobody
you try to dialogue with. They'll say, "Look, you get the vaccine, and the risk of dying is going to be 2/3 less."
Yes,
I mean, and they believe it.
Yes,
that's the problem.
Yes, it's like, yes. It just shows you this was an existence proof. This paper was an existence proof. This paper shows that the CDC can put out anything. And as long as it has that little CDC logo on it, they're going to believe it. And it was kind of a test. Like the next one will say, hey, we found this drug that will, double your lifespan. And when they come up with this ridiculous stuff, like nobody in the medical community, did you see anyone in the medical community that is disputing this, saying, no, but look, to her credit, Janet Woodcock says, well, this is confounded, but okay. So I give Janet Woodcock some credit on that one. She's not totally.
But the end result is that they've got this paper published that is looked as authoritatively as this is the trusted science. Non-disputed in the United States, and almost every other country in the world it is, but in the US, this is the truth because this is science. And that's what we have to deal with. I mean, it's just, they making up fantasies endorsed by the public health authorities. And it's such a giant leap for people to get over, because if they get over that and they make that hurdle that, they have to abandon every bit of confidence that they have in the whole system. They just concede that they have to capitulate and surrender and understand that it's all a giant fraud. And the entire purpose is to increase the revenues for these corporations that are producing this stuff.
Yeah. So this is, as far as I know, this is the biggest fraud, the biggest house of cards in history, in American history. I've never seen anything like this. And I've never heard of anything like this, because the conspirators here who are telling this false narrative and are echoing the false narrative are all the three-letter agencies under HHS, basically, FDA, CDC, and NIH. They're all in on it. Congress is all in on it. Mainstream media is all in on it. And the medical community is all in on it. And so we've never seen, this is a massive takedown. Okay. So the mainstream media their credibility is trash. Mainstream media medical academia, Congress, and the agencies. Their reputations will all be trashed because people like me have been yelling and screaming, saying, you guys have to look at the data. And they have been ignoring us, and they censor us rather than engaging us with dialogue. And none of these people will engage us in dialogue. And by the way, the strategy for changing this is that we're going to run a series of ads, and each of the ads will be a unique personality, like a Peter McCullough, sports figure, whatever. They'll relate their personal anecdotes for what's happened to them. And they will say, look, before you get vaccinated, check the facts, listen to the other side of the story, because people aren't hearing the other side of the story. And the CDC is expressly suppressing. It's so obvious, right? When you have the White House that has a hit list of censorship, it's very clear. And the mainstream media, like CNN, do you ever see Peter McCullough on CNN? No, because they want to give you one side of it, and they're deliberately giving you only one side of it. And the only thing we're saying to America is, America, it used to be about a diversity of views, and that you'd have freedom of speech, and that you'd have freedom to express your opinion. And what's happening is that freedom has been taken away. If you don't agree with the mainstream narrative, you're silenced. And so what we're going to do is run a series of ads, and we'll only be able to run it on alternate media because the mainstream media has shut us down, won't run our ads. The media that we will say is just to say, hey, look, before you get vaccinated, listen to both sides of the story.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable ask. And everybody who does their ad, one person would say, hey, I lost my son to this. I think I was lied to. But my advice to you is listen and hear both sides of the story before you decide. And I think that's a message that can resonate with every American. And it's just that they're not hearing that there's another side of the story. And so what we want to do is we want to present that other side of the story to people so they understand that that there are people who look at the data, and you can look at the data directly yourself, and you will see that there's no way. If you look at the data directly, there's no way that you won't be convinced that these vaccines are the most dangerous vaccines in human history.
Yeah, and there really is no reason to ever get it for anyone, because even guys like Malone will capitulate and acknowledge or suggest that elderly with comorbidity should get it. I don't buy that. I don't think anyone should get it. But
correct. You're correct, and he does that. He's not basing that on any numbers.
Yeah.
Ask him for the numbers.
He's a smart guy too.
He is a smart guy. I love Robert Malone. We disagree on that one. And he tells me, he says, look, I get where you're coming from. I get that you're right, but I don't want to be too far out there because my credibility is already strained.
Yeah, he's capitulating. He doesn't realize he can't recover. Once you hit taking the red pill, there's no going back.
Yeah.
But the other part of that message is that no one should get it. But this is an absolute. You just have to do everything in your power to make sure that no child under 11 ever gets this vaccine.
Oh no, nobody ever should get this vaccine.
They should never get it. There is no benefit. There's zero benefit. There's only risk. There is no reward to anyone. So they can't get it. You just have to refuse it and do it under whatever power you can. You cannot let your child be sacrificed.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what the data shows. It's unambiguous. And that's why nobody will debate us.
Yeah.
People should say, hey, look, I'll take the jab when you debate Steve Kirsch and his team. I want to see that. I want to see that debate.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay. And then I'm happy to take the jab. I just want to see the debate. Like, why won't you debate this guy because I hang out with Peter McCullough and Robert Malone and Byron Brittle and Geert Vanden Bosch and Jessica Rose and Matthew Crawford, and there's nobody that's going to win a debate with these people. Nobody.
You can't. Yeah, it's just because it's impossible.
The facts are not on their side.
Yeah, they're not. So Anyway, so obviously
because they're
this
great
is-
debaters.
Yeah, but this is a continuing story. This is not the end of the story by any means, shape, or means. You're a phenomenal resource. I just deeply appreciate what you've compiled and continue to put together. So, what would you suggest is the best way for people to continue to learn what you're uncovering and compiling in the future?
So a couple of different ways. I have an account on Gab, St. Kirsch, Kirsch. I don't know how long I've been on Twitter, quite frankly. I'm surprised that I haven't been, my account hasn't been removed. So I suggest people follow me on Gab. It's actually, I actually like the platform better than Twitter, because you can edit your posts and,
Mhm.
fix mistakes and, correct things after you posted them. And it has rich text and so forth. So I'm encouraging people to subscribe to me on Gab, St. Kirsch, Stkirsch, and also subscribe to me on Substack.
Mhm.
And it's stevekirsch.substack.com. And so anything that has beef in it, I will publish to the Substack. And the Substack is got somewhere like 20 or 30 articles right now.
Mhm.
And they're pretty,
So do you like your Substack better than your site, which is stevekirsch.io?
skirsch.io.
Oh, I'm sorry, skirsch.
Yeah, so I've kind of migrated to Substack because I like it, because it's
Okay, that's good to know.
It's easy stats, and you can see the mailing lists, and you can see what your subscribers are. You can look at it's really easy to look at how many people have viewed your articles. And I encourage people to make a $5. You can subscribe for free. So if you don't have money, subscribe for free, fine. I encourage people to subscribe to the $5 a month plan,
Or the less expensive one, $50 per year.
yeah, or if you or do the $50 a year. And what that does is that subscription helps Substack, right? Because they get a portion of that subscription, and Substack is really important because they're a non-censor platform, right? If you do illegal stuff, they'll censor you. But if you do legal stuff and you have alternate points of view, you will not be censored on Substack. And so I really encourage people to do the subscription and to support platforms like Substack. And any money that, and I also get a portion of that, any money that I get, I will be donating 100% to funding ads and to fighting this. And so if we can get 100,000 subscribers, that's 500,000 a month. That's serious firepower.
Yeah,
because
it's a powerful system. It absolutely is. It's
so
allowing us to go forward and not be suppressed by the censorship.
Yes, it's absolutely crucial. And so this is why I'm directing people to Substack, and also urging people to subscribe if they can afford $5 a month. It's the price of a cup of coffee, but it's critical. Your life is worth more than $5 a month, and your child's life. And people ask me, why am I doing this? And I'm not making.
You have no conflict of interest.
There's no conflict of interest. I'm
you have a
losing
negative
money on
conflict
this,
of interest,
big time. And because I'm funding a lot of the things that are going on out of my personal pocketbook here, because the donors that donated to the early treatment fund, none of them, not a single one, is saying, yeah, I'm gung-ho on this, on what you're doing to save lives on the vaccine. My motivation is 100% on saving lives. That's how I get that's my reward in life. Like if I can save one life, my life was worth living. And if I can save 1,000 lives, it's even better. If I can save 100,000 lives, that is more meaningful to me than any of the things I've done in the past. And so this is
your behavior strongly suggests and supports and reinforces what your statements.
Yeah. And the other thing is that people say, oh no, this guy is a fraud. He took the vaccine and now he's telling people not to take the vaccine, do what he did. Now, but he said, look, I took the vaccine because I thought at the time I was being told the truth.
Yeah.
So, and then people say, well, he's making money on this. And he said, look, I said, really? If I'm making money on this, please tell me how I'm making money, because I don't, and they never do that.
You've lost millions. I want to reinforce, you've lost millions of dollars by
Oh yeah, yeah. Just by quitting my
embracing this
job, I was
view.
forced out of my job because I wanted to speak out against the vaccines.
Yeah. And
I mean, I had a choice.
losing 99% of your social network in your area and your scientific advisory
Yeah,
board.
we
You're
lost
not
all our
creating- you're
friends.
not- yeah, you lost your friends. You're creating enemies. So, but what's surprising to me, I mean, these scientists that were obviously respected for the early treatment program, that they had to be intelligent. You know what? It's just odd that you couldn't convince one of them with your data.
They wouldn't talk to me.
Data.
They would not engage.
That is just profound example of how effective this propaganda is. I
Yeah.
mean, they knew you were out there. They knew you, and they refused. Once you shifted,
Right.
and you'd think they'd be at least curious to find out why you shifted. That they just think you'd instantly turn psychotic.
Correct. Well, you know, one of the members of my scientific advisory board called me a snake oil salesman. And,
Well, you're not selling anything.
yeah, exactly. It's all, you know, pretty much free. And, you know, if you want to do the $5, great. If you don't, hey, that's fine too. You know, you can get the information for free. If you do the $5, it's better because you support Substack and so forth. So yeah. I mean, but she said I was a snake oil salesman, and she cited the fact that when we knew that fluvoxamine was successful, and I did the calculation, it's a Fisher exact test, and it was 10 to the minus 14, a p-value of 10 to the minus 14.
That's pretty low.
A p-value of 10 to the minus 14. Are you kidding me? Like, you never get a p-value, and this is a small experiment. This is with like 80 people on each cohort, right? 80 people, and you get a p-value of 10 to the minus 14.
Usually 10 to the minus second is considered significant, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. 10 to the minus 14 is off the charts. And so I looked at that and I said, okay, so look, if you can, I'll give you $1 million if you can find a confounder or a bias that would explain the 10 to the minus 14 p-value. Nobody did. Okay, so why don't you believe the result? So I was saying, like, look, guys, we should all get together and we should encourage people to use fluvoxamine, because it's impossible that the drug doesn't work and the drug doesn't have a safety profile problem. It's been around for 40 years. It doesn't kill anyone.
Yeah.
Nobody would support that. So now, a year later, the clinical trial comes out and proves I was right. And it shows that there's a 12x mortality decrease. We decrease mortality by 12 times if you take the drug early and you take the dose that's recommended and you get it early.
Yeah, but I think that's probably, I mean, I'm sure fluvoxamine, obviously you've shown it to a pretty extraordinary p-value, but there's other therapies too that
oh, sure.
You know,
Sure.
I have a bias against pharmaceuticals that have been based, and I did go to medical school, and I bought the Kool-Aid back then and was brainwashed and got out of it in the 90s. But normally it's been my experience that there's natural approaches that are equally, if not more effective, and they virtually have no side effects, because any pharmacological approach invariably has some unanticipated side effects.
Yeah, but you know, fluvoxamine on the scale of side effects is just really, really low.
It's probably minimal and
right.
very
But the
unlikely,
point
but it's still
is,
there.
the point is that all the press covered it when it was in the phase 3 trial, and all the scientists that I talked to said, "Hey, Steve, look, as soon as it gets out of phase 3, all the scientists will use fluvoxamine." Yeah. No. What happened is, got published. All the press picked it up. Everybody picked it up. Everybody wrote an article about it. NIH did nothing. WHO did nothing. Doctors do nothing.
Yeah,
Okay?
That's exactly
They
what you
all
predict.
take their lead from what the NIH and the CDC do.
And that's the challenge. So fortunately, you've been one of the leaders in helping us understand these numbers. And we need people like you to compile the data. And I would strongly recommend, encourage people to subscribe to your Substack, since that seems to be the best way to do it. And look at we're going to have a link to the, I don't probably be over 200 slides by the time this gets posted, because you're compiling stuff all the time. It's great. It literally is a book. And it's a good book because you don't have, there's every slide is a picture, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. So it's just, it's just a fantastic contribution. I really appreciate.
Yeah. And the
putting
way
it
that you
together.
can use it, by the way, because a lot of people can't go through 200 slides, is you say, hey, here's this 200 slide deck. Pick which question you want to talk about, or pick which question you want to answer. Right. And when they can't pick one of the 200 questions to answer, it's like you proved your point. You didn't even have to get into a discussion. It's like all of these points are unanswerable. You can't answer, you can't explain them unless the vaccines are super dangerous. There is no other explanation. So I collected essentially, 180 things that all show that there's no other explanation for these things than, like, how can this happen on a perfectly safe vaccine? Basically, right. Kids are dropping like flies after the vaccine. Oh, look, soccer players in Europe, they're dying at 60 times the rate, after the vaccines rolled out than they were in the last 20 years. Like, if it wasn't the vaccines, what was it?
Yeah. So I don't think you'll get a disagreement with almost anyone who views our interview, since we were kind of like preaching to the choir, but they need the stats to reinforce to their loved ones and people that are similar to your scientific advisory command who bailed on you. So, yeah. But at least they got the data. So I want to thank you for compiling that and continuing, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the great work that you're doing. I'm a big fan of what you've been doing. And I know my friends are, and they say, if there was anyone to put at the top of that misinformation list, you would be the last person on earth that should go on a list of sending out misinformation.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and it's good. We're making some headway, because today, as we speak, we post an article out that we're suing Elizabeth Warren for writing a letter to the CEO of Amazon to have them ban our book. It's like the one that Bobby Kennedy wrote a forward to. So, yeah, but it's going to be good. Hopefully she won't be inspired to write another letter for Bobby's book that's coming out.
Yeah. Well, Bobby's been trying to get a debate on vaccine safety for 20 years. Yeah. Nobody will debate him. And the reason is the same reason that they won't debate us. Yeah. It's because they know that they will lose. Yeah. 100%. It's unfair. He's too skilled. Yeah, I know. He's awesome. We talk all the time. He's a great guy. All right. Well, I couldn't agree more. I'm glad to know him as a friend. So thank you for your doing. I'm glad I got connected with you. I was been looking forward to it, and you kind of reinforced everything I've digested from your previous content. So thanks for everything. Great. Thank you for the opportunity to tell my story on your program. Thanks so much for watching. Remember,